are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
It was 1776 when the founders signed the writ of independence from the Brits. It was revolution.
Tonight's featured show is Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. Welcome to the Republic News Network for our live national broadcast. You may call me Kelby, and tonight I'm going to be acting as your moderator. The RNN, which stands for the Republic News Network, has been doing this radio show since 2010, and it's always been a friendly introduction for the people of the United States Corporation. Here we go. It's true. The United States is a federal corporation, and their exclusive jurisdiction is in the District of Columbia. The Republic government was simply a bunch of U.S. citizens that in law don't have access to the Bill of Rights, and they realized they wanted to be Americans as our founders and our law provided each and every one of us. See, we've been hard at work since 2008, and since 2010 we have successfully re-inhabited the original government vacated under Lincoln in 1861. I know, it's hard to understand. Don't worry. We are law-abiding, peaceful Americans and very pro-government, and we love our country. You can consider the Republic members are tired of the corruption that we see every day. See, we found in the law that there is two forms of government here on the land, and we did something about it. We are people. Mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. We have families just like you. We simply found some truths, and now we're sharing these important truths with the rest of the world. So get ready to hear things that sound amazing, and get ready to understand that you too are about to be a part of history. We welcome each one of you to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel and your Republic if you so choose. But before we go into our broadcast tonight, please bow your head in prayer. Father God, we want to thank you so much for the opportunity to come before you and have a show where we can express truth to people. Bless this show, bless the people on it, and we pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Mr. Happel, I yield the floor.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another program of Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. We have a very special guest on our program tonight. We have Sheriff Richard Mack on the program, and the name of our program is The Role of the Constitutional Sheriff, and in parens, Protecting the Citizens from the Tyranny of Globalism, and that's basically what our subject will be tonight. Sheriff Mack is well known as really the leader and founder of the constitutional sheriff movement in our country. I had the great pleasure of meeting Sheriff Mack several times, once in Hamilton, Montana with the Celebrating Conservatism group over there, and then again when he was a presenter, and also I was at a program for Montana Policy Institute in Bozeman, Montana. And Sheriff Mack is a terrific gentleman. He has a tremendous stature as a constitutional sheriff. And with that, Sheriff Mack, I'd like to introduce you to the program and ask you to say a few words about what your constitutional sheriff initiative is doing and how you've been working that.
Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate being on with you. And there's been a lot of movement with the constitutional sheriffs, and I guess most recently the campaign, the recent election and campaign season brought us some new sheriffs, and it also regrettably got a couple of our good constitutional sheriffs unelected. The most notable there would be our Sheriff of the Year for 2014, Sheriff Nick Finch in Liberty County, Florida. He lost really badly in his county, and we're not sure why, but it does happen. You know, I lost my third election right while I was still suing the federal government. When I was sheriff, I sued, as you very well know, I sued the Clinton administration over gun control and the Brady Bill and overreach and the violations of the 10th Amendment that the federal government seems to do as a matter of routine. And so in the middle of that, I got unelected. So it does happen, but we're really thrilled at the same time that we had some new constitutional sheriffs who I campaigned for elected. Texas, Oklahoma, Arizona were the most notable ones, and we gained about 15 new constitutional sheriffs. So we're thrilled with that. We're thrilled with the response we're getting from sheriffs, but it isn't enough, and that's why I'm glad to be on your program, because we need more people to join us, to be a part of what we're doing, and people can't just say, stand on the sideline and clap for those of us who are going along in the parade. Everybody's got to step up and get in the parade. No more standing on the sidelines cheering for this movement. We the people have got to be involved in this. And just like the founder said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And we the people are the most important cog in the wheel of American government. And we've got to be involved. And so I absolutely am on my knees begging everybody, don't just listen to this program, but get involved in what we're talking about. Every citizen, yes, every citizen can get involved in the constitutional sheriff movement. And why? Because the sheriff reports to you. You are the only boss the sheriff has. He has no other supervisor. He has no other leader above him. The President of the United States cannot tell your sheriff what to do. The governor cannot tell your sheriff what to do. Nobody else, not the county commissioners, not the county attorney, no county judge, nobody. The sheriff is completely independent and autonomous and reports only to we the people. And that's one of the reasons why he's the most powerful law enforcement officer in this country and in his county. He is the CLEO, and if you don't know what the CLEO is, that's Chief Law Enforcement Officer in your county. And that's the way it should be. That's the way it's always been. And hopefully we'll be able to keep it that way when actually there's a lot of people who are trying to stop that. But it nevertheless is the truth. And we are moving forward with this as absolutely as much as we can with the limited budget we have. And that's where we the people can come in too and help. We really need help funding, and the best way to help us get funded is become a member. And there's a fee to become a member, and you just go to the website. CSPOA stands for Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, CSPOA.org. Get involved, become a part of this. And I guess the big announcement that we have is that we're doing a certification course for trainers in Washington, D.C., well, right outside Washington, D.C., between Baltimore and D.C., the day after this historical inauguration of Donald Trump. And don't get me wrong, Donald Trump is not going to save the Union. What will save the Union is we the people staying vigilant and involved. Donald Trump's going to do what he does, and we don't know how great a president he's going to be at this point, and obviously the Democrats are going to be fighting him tooth and nail. So really, none of us should be believing that our Constitution is going to be restored in Washington, D.C. Pretty much Washington, D.C. is going to be Washington, D.C. It's too corrupt and bought and paid for. But where we restore liberty is in our counties and our own communities, and that's why this is such an important movement with the constitutional sheriff, because he or she standing with you in the holy cause of liberty, we can take America back, county by county, sheriff by sheriff, and state by state. And that is our solution, and none of that's going to work without you. So if you're going to just think, well, Donald Trump's going to save us, or, oh, good, the Republicans are in charge now again, and they'll get something done relative to freedom, that's just nonsense. History is not on your side at all.
Right. Well, I know that I think we all understand, at least those of us that understand how our Constitution and our system of government was designed to work, recognize that we are to be a bottom-up, not a top-down government.
Correct.
And that the role of the county sheriff is to make sure that the laws and the local laws, being really the more important ones for the individual citizens, that those individual laws and those federal laws, for that matter, are upheld, and that's his role. I would like to ask you, Sheriff Mack, if you would kind of address the role of the county commissioners in supporting the constitutional sheriff program, because I'm an ex-county commissioner, and I, like many others that stand up for the Constitution, had a very difficult time in getting reelected because there are so many people that are used to the idea that we're going to be controlled by the federal government, and they fight that. Would you maybe address the way that you see the county commissioners in being a supporting role in constitutional sheriff program?
Yeah, that's absolutely a great question, and it's a vital cooperation, and I would love to see it. I didn't get any support from my county commissioners when I sued the federal government and I fought the feds. They had been brainwashed into believing that the federal government, although they might be out of control, once they say you have to do something, then you have to do it. Well, that's such baloney, and just like I said, it's just brainwashing. So if the county commissioners and the sheriffs work together in providing liberty and upholding and defending the Constitution as they've sworn to do, that is the greatest protection that the American people could have, because they know at that point that there is a local alternative. There's a local system now in place to what I really like to quote James Madison on, to erect the barriers against the encroachments of the national authority. And with the sheriff doing it all by himself, and he's the only public official doing that, he's going to look like the Lone Ranger. He's going to look like he's rogue and maverick and outside the law. If he's the only one doing it, he's not going to last. And I think that's pretty much what happened to me. I was the only one in the county who was really standing up for this thing, even though the governor of Arizona came out and supported me. No one, the other local officials did in my county, Graham County. And so it is vital that we give the sheriff support, and the county commissioners can pass resolutions reinforcing the Second Amendment, reinforcing the Constitution, reinforcing the principles of liberty, and then the sheriff stands and enforces those. Man, that would be wonderful and so ideal for the American people. And when the sheriff is standing against the powers that be, especially Washington bureaucrats, then the county commissioners come out and stand beside him, and man, that is the most wonderful scenario that could ever be there. And yes, I have actually said that numerous times, and if you could add the county attorney to that too, that would be just marvelous. It would restore liberty tomorrow. And in your county, I don't care who is listening. I don't care what county. In your county, if you have the sheriff, county commissioners, and county attorney standing for the Constitution, your county will be a constitutional county tomorrow. And see, look, we're just talking about a handful of people there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Now, the sheriff can do it alone. The sheriff can do it alone. But if he doesn't have we the people behind him, if he doesn't have the people of the county behind him, he'll be finished. He'll
right,
be gone.
And that's the problem. If we don't start getting local elected officials working together to restore the Constitution, it won't happen as a result of one person. They may be able to make a difference for a while, but there's a lot of forces aligned against us if we stand up for the Constitution, and we need to get more people on board with that program. And I think, Sheriff Mack, your your outreach and your program is doing a marvelous job of really seeing that happen nationwide, and I applaud you for that effort.
Well, thanks.
This is Bob.
It's been an uphill battle. Yeah, go ahead.
Sheriff Mack, I say, this is Bob, and I wanted to ask Sheriff Mack, because I think the last 3 minutes of this discussion is where it all, I believe, is. I know you've worked hard at it, but if we could just get a dose of reality, in my mind, the reason, as you said earlier, there's ground being lost, and there are significant movements to diminish sheriffs across the country.
Yes.
My question would be this: how do we get the electorate to understand and the commissioners to understand the very significant issue that is their protection, that they otherwise are in this massive cloud of bureaucracy out of D.C.?
Well, that's really the $10,000 question, and it leads into one other thing, and that is federal grants. The federal government knows that they have no authority over the counties and states. So what they have done is they've established a bribery system called grants, federal grants. And in order to receive all this money, and in fact, you've heard it recently, sanctuary cities will be cut off from the federal funds. Apron strings will be cut. And so, and actually I agree with that, because I don't like sanctuary cities. However, there should not be the federal government funding any of these cities. They should be funding themselves. And the federal government has no business. In fact, it's actually unlawful for the federal government to be funding states' budgets or county budgets and sheriff's offices and police departments, as they do nationwide. And I would say at least 50 to 70% of all your sheriffs and police departments across the country receive federal funding. And the times that I've talked to sheriffs across the country and they say, I've never taken federal grant and I'm never going to, those are sheriffs who understand what's really going on. And that is the ultimate answer to why people, other county commissioners and other local officials don't get involved, because they are so scared to death to lose federal funding and tick off the king, and he'll wave his wand and or scepter and say, no more money for you. And so most recently, though, the only reason I use the sanctuary cities as an example is because that's what's been in the news media recently. And I every time I see that come up, I say, well, they shouldn't be taking money from the feds in the first place, because that's what happens. You don't do what we say, we take away your money. And so that's a practice that I never participated in. When Bill Clinton came out with his 100,000 new police officers money, I didn't take it, and it was only temporary anyway, even if it had been something I wanted to do. But no way. And so if you want your office to remain independent and autonomous, then you cannot be taking money. And then the county commissioners don't have to compromise liberty for money. And I think that's disgusting and despicable that they do it in the first place, because literally that's what these people do. In order to take money from the feds, they compromise their oath of office to uphold and defend the Constitution, and thus American liberty is compromised because of bribes from Washington, D.C.
I think you're absolutely right. And the thing I would ask, though, is how do we convince local law enforcement to refuse to take the bait?
And one other thing, in fact, that takes me back to the training we do. We offer the training publicly, and in fact, I'm doing it this Wednesday in Kansas with Chris Ann Hall, who goes around the country waking up people and doing the educational classes that are very similar to the ones we do at the CSPOA. The answer and the solution is you must have people at the local level that know and understand the importance of their jobs, and that their job as a county official, and this is everybody. It's the governor all the way down to the local dog catcher. Every single person in a government job, and that even includes teachers, in a government job is required to uphold and defend the Constitution. And as a teacher in Arizona, which I have been, you swear an oath of allegiance to the Constitution. The sheriff swears an oath of allegiance to the U.S. Constitution and to the Constitution of the state. Every public official swears an oath of allegiance. We teach people what that really means, and that ignoring that oath and summarily disobeying that oath is a crime, and it could be actually treason. And the Founding Fathers required everybody in government to swear that oath in Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution. We are required by law before we can take our position as a cop or anyone else in government to swear allegiance to the Constitution, and thus we have sworn to protect the principles of liberty that our country was founded upon. Mm-hmm. So the process that we believe in is, first, CSPOA is an educational association, and we are teaching sheriffs and cops and public officials and everybody and the public, because the public needs this education as well, that it's okay and it is required, quite honestly, for public officials, including just the rookie cop and patrol officer in your neighborhood, that he knows and understands the ultimate importance of his job is to protect liberty. It's not to write tickets. It's not to kick indoors. It's not to get rid of marijuana or other illicit drugs. The ultimate importance, in fact, is absolutely vital that every police officer know and understand that he needs to quit thinking about his job according to what he sees on TV and movies about cops and how glamorous that is, that the ultimate importance of his job is to protect the rights of the people in his jurisdiction. And that means against all enemies, both foreign and domestic, just like the oath of office says. And that means that when a bureaucrat from Washington, D.C., comes in and tries to confiscate a gun from a law-abiding citizen, or they try to come in and confiscate property, or the IRS tries to come in and seize assets without due process, then the sheriff and the others in that community all stand up. And I'm not talking about just the citizens here committing civil disobedience, which I totally agree with, that it's the sheriffs and cops and public officials standing with the American people and protecting the individual from being victimized by our own government. It's a peaceful process. It's an effective process. It's an educational process. And yes, that's where we are. We've already had sheriffs that have done these stands against the federal government, but we need more, and we need more people educated about it and dedicated to it. And so we are a educational and motivational and pragmatic organization that says you can keep your oath of office, you must keep your oath of office, and you can put liberty and freedom first in the execution of your jobs.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, that leads to a question that I had for you, and you can certainly help to answer this. With the federalization of local law enforcement, we see a new emphasis on tactical training and military techniques that are normally reserved for combat situations. What's happened to the public service role of local law enforcement, and why do we need to stand up against this? Because it has led to a change in mission that ends up with more violent and negative outcomes than we've had in the past. How do we turn this dynamic around?
Well, first we need to look at what happened, and this has evolved over the past 30, 40, 50 years. where the police just keep getting more militaristic in their weaponry and the way they look and their utility belt around their waist. When I started in law enforcement, we had a baton that I hardly ever wore. I just kept it in the car, and most cops did. And we had handcuffs and a gun and a portable radio. That's it. Now it's tasers and mace and all sorts. I mean, you can't even put something else on that belt. It is so full of the types of weaponry that they use today. And it's gone way too far. And I'll tell you where a lot of it came from. A lot of it came from TV and movies. And I know you'll remember back in the 80s, the top television shows on TV were SWAT, SWAT, and Hill Street Blues.
Yep.
And Hill Street Blues, I mean, we talked about Hill Street Blues in our briefings when I was a rookie cop. Before we go out on patrol, we'd talk about the latest thing that Hill Street Blues did. And in fact, you'll remember the theme in Hill Street Blues. They would have a briefing by their sergeant, and he says, now let's go do it to them before they do it to us. And that was the theme. That was going big time around law enforcement. And my chief and others in our department would say that. Now remember, let's do it to them before they do it to us. And that, that's just not service-oriented. If you look at posters around the country where they want people to try to wear their seatbelts, and that's another ridiculous thing, the law enforcement from Hawaii to Bangor, Maine, is forcing people to wear their seatbelts. Forcing. And they're doing roadblocks to make sure that people are wearing their seatbelts, and if not, they, even in some cases, they impound vehicles and they write these ridiculous tickets. And that's another example of the evolution of the onerous tactics used by police. If you look at the posters that they're saying, warning people to wear their seatbelts, they show a very mean and masculine police officer with his really intimidating sunglasses, and he looks really mean, and man, he's going to really come down on you if you don't wear your seatbelts. I'm totally against that baloney. That's absolute a propaganda scheme to scare people that this guy is out to get you, and that's what police have done. The leadership in America has taken the profession of law enforcement and moved it into an attack mode and an intimidating mode and a taskmaster type role instead of a friend. And a commissioner of New York way back in the 90s said that the biggest problem with law enforcement in America is that our streets are patrolled by strangers. Well, it's not just strangers, it's mean strangers. People, they have made the people afraid of these police officers, and we need to do just the opposite. And we need to walk in neighborhoods. We need to go see people. We need to get into these places in Chicago and St. Louis and New York and Los Angeles and start doing foot patrols and really getting in there and getting to know people and get to know their problems and see how we can prevent these crimes and these shootings and get the guns out of the hands of these gangs and get families and parents involved in the process. And that's never going to work if they keep looking at us as the enemy and as the mean guys and somebody that they should be afraid of.
No,
we need to change that, and we do. And we honestly believe, too, that in our training where we bring up the fundamentals of constitutional principles, that no cop is going to start beating somebody when they are converted to the patriotism of American ideals.
No, that's a great statement and a good understanding of how this whole process has evolved. Because I remember telling my wife back in the 80s, early 80s, really how the ninja suits and all this SWAT stuff was going to have a really negative impact on law enforcement, and by golly, it has.
It really has, and it's really our own fault. We let TV and propaganda and the types of things that we see on TV influence us. And I'll tell you right now, the reason why I wanted to be a cop is because of the image that was given to me by TV and movies. I kid you not.
Really? Wow.
Of course.
Wow.
Now, I wanted also because my dad was an FBI agent. I actually tried to get in the FBI. But it was also the mystique and the image of an FBI agent. But still, the same thing applies there. The movies and the media representations of cops and FBI agents, that's why I wanted to be in law enforcement. And when I came to the realization how wrong I was and how wrong the ticket writing and the abuse of citizens was, is what woke me up and changed me and led me to become a constitutional cop, a constitutional detective, and then that led me, of course, to become a constitutional sheriff, and I started that movement back in 1994.
That's amazing. Well, that's a great admission. Incidentally, Sheriff Mack, I was raised, at least initially in my life, as a red diaper baby. My father was a card-carrying communist back in the 1930s, and I listened to this crap as a kid, and it wasn't until I was an adult and started paying taxes and dealing with all the various agencies that I realized, how totally wrong these collectivist ideas are. We're going to take a very short break here, but we'll be back in just a few minutes, and we will continue this discussion. Sheriff Mack, I'd like to talk about the progressive movement and how globalism is impacting personal liberty. So with that, we'll take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Sorry, Dan, I got to take a brief intermission, and we'll continue with the Dan Happel Show. A story of a common family. So my daughter asked me a very important question. She said, "Dad, why do you work so hard on this republic?" And I answered her, "Well, baby, the republic as given by our founding fathers is the most important form of government ever given to man." She said, "Dad, why don't you let somebody else do it?" I said, "Well, sweetheart, most of America thinks things are okay. And so long as their lives are not upset, they don't have to care about the important things that are taking place in their own country. Your dad likes to do things. I just don't want to sit and wait for somebody else. And if we didn't have our founding fathers, we wouldn't have this country. They were doers. They wanted something great for their children and grandchildren. And sweetheart, so do I." Ladies and gentlemen, I wish I could say that that's what happens in almost every home of our country, but it's not. Just 8 years ago, as a man who watched an $800 billion bailout given to banks when that money could have paid off every home in foreclosure in this country, which would have resulted in the banks getting the money anyway, I realized that we had a problem. And I stood up and I did something about it. I'm asking you to do something about it. I'm asking you to not just listen to these phone calls. I'm asking you to go to republicfortheunitedstates.org and read the Declaration of Sovereign Intent. Understand what we have done over the last 8 years. Understand what our intention is, what we are desiring to do for the people of this nation. And do something about it. Participate in the phone calls. Participate in building your states. Participate in finding a governor, finding a leader, finding the body politic of people that are going to stand up and build the de jure state. This is what we need. We need you to do something about it. We need you to be doers. Wednesday night of every week, we have a Building the States phone call at 6 p.m. Pacific. We encourage you to get on this phone call and understand how you too can be a doer. Thank you. I yield.
Okay, we're back, and Sheriff Mack, we talked briefly about globalism. See, I see that as being the real problem we've got in our country now, is that we've got a so-called progressive movement, which I think a better term is regressive, but how that march to global collectivism is impacting personal liberty and private property. Will you give us a brief overview of the role of the constitutional county sheriff in protecting us from this globalism?
Well, yeah, it does everything. And sometimes sheriffs say, well, that's just putting too much on the back of the sheriff. Well, you know what? You're the one that asked for the job. You ran. You get paid pretty well. Most sheriffs get paid pretty well across the country. Some still don't, like in New Mexico, but most sheriffs are making good money. Whether they are or not, it doesn't matter. I'd do it for free. But this is the thing. I don't care what Washington, D.C. is doing. I don't care what the United Nations is doing. I don't care what George Soros or anybody else is doing. There's not one thing that they are doing criminally or politically that is contrary to our Constitution. I don't care one iota what they're doing. There is not one of those situations that the sheriff can't stop. I'm talking about overtaxation. I'm talking about the overreach of the federal government. I'm talking about asset seizures and confiscation of property, impounding of vehicles, destroying families, destroying land, taking away farms, destroying ranches, as they've done out in the West exponentially. The federal government has destroyed so many farms and so many ranches, and if we look at the Bundy situation, the only lesson there is with the Bundy situation in Nevada is that they were the last ranchers in Clark County. Out of 53 ranchers, the Bundys are the last ones. And the federal government has shut every one of those down, destroyed these family businesses, destroying our food supply. And what does the national media talk about? Bundy was a crook because he wouldn't pay his grazing fees. And the whole message is, why are they doing this to these people? Why have they destroyed these ranchers' lives and livelihoods? And why are they trying to take all the land? And now Obama comes back and puts the icing on the cake with that, with his monument declaration that was right there of the Bundy's land where they were ranching. Mm-hmm. And so here it goes again, showing again the federal government's proclivity to destroying land rights, and Nevadans are sitting there going, well, now they own almost 90% of all of Nevada, and right now, it's the truth. The federal government owns 90% of Nevada. Every bit of that has been globalist movement to take over the land, and right now, the federal government in the West, if you would really look at it, they own about 60% of all of the western states. They think they own it, and the Constitution says they can't own it.
Right.
And if you look at all the other laws regarding this, the Homestead Act about how land was given over to people, the federal government is so out of line and so out of control. So let's just look at all that. We all know that they've done this. Now, who's going to protect it? And this is where the sheriffs come in, again, standing with county commissioners and state legislatures and governors and saying, you know what? As in, I've said in Arizona for such a long time. Arizona should run the Grand Canyon. That's our canyon. It's not the federal government's land. It's not their monument. And for anybody to think that the king in Washington, D.C. can just go throughout the states and say, oh, well, we're going to take this mountain now as a monument. We're going to take this desert now as a monument. We're going to take, in fact, do you know that Obama has also declared monument area outside Hawaii in the middle of the ocean, which means fishermen cannot fish there anymore? He did the same thing off the coast out past North Carolina, and he did the same thing there out in the middle of the ocean. He declares it a monument, so people can't fish there anymore.
Right.
It may have been farther north, actually, closer to Massachusetts. But anyway, he's done it on east and west coast, stealing again property that is not his. And he doesn't care if it's land or water or whatever. He's just stealing it right and left. And these poor fishermen are going, okay, now what do we do? And so this globalist movement that Obama has absolutely made it his legacy to do has gotten so insane. And if we don't have people that are educated and waking up in the local areas and in the states, this is going to continue. And so again, let me come back to the solution. The solution is states and counties standing against this and not allowing it. And if they come in to try to take your land or try to enforce that, the state's enforcement people saying, you're not coming in here, and don't come in here. And we put them on notice. We will no longer tolerate this. And in fact, we had the Utah Sheriff's Association say that about gun control, and they wrote a letter to the president and to the vice president saying, we will not allow or tolerate any more of your gun control procedures where you come into our counties and our jurisdictions and try to create criminals out of our law-abiding citizens simply because they own a gun you guys don't agree with. And this is already happening, and that's one of our CSPOA proudest moments was that letter that went out from the sheriffs. And that's what we need. We need counties and sheriffs and states telling the federal government, putting them on notice, these things are no longer going to be allowed or tolerated in our states and counties.
Well, I think that's excellent. And you're absolutely right. I know with the Bundy Ranch, they were trying to turn that into a solar site for Harry Reid and his son to sell the grants to the Chinese to come in and build a solar farm there. And, there's so much collusion that's going on at a national and international level in this globalist attempt. And, the Law of the Sea Treaty and some of the things that President Obama has been pushing along are the things you're talking about, the fishing rights. And if we allow this to continue, it's going to destroy our country. And I see this, your effort and your movement, as being a wonderful way to reassert the rights of the citizens of the United States. And I really applaud you on that effort.
Well, again, if the people don't back us up on this, please tell me where else you can go to stop all of this. You're going to vote for another Democrat or Republican in Washington, D.C.? The only thing you're going to see in Washington, D.C. is a steady and gradual and very firm march away from our Constitution. And I really am glad that Trump won for a lot of different reasons, but I do not believe for a moment that he's going to stop or change that. I think we've got a little window here open, and Obama leaving is helping that window open, and I believe that Trump is going to keep that window open for us, but we've got to take advantage of that, and if we don't act in the local areas that I've been talking about, then it's not going to work. And the first group of people that have got to wake up is the American people, because we're the ones that elect the county commissioners. We're the ones who elect the sheriffs, and we have got to wake up and turn this around. And I believe that this recent movement to put Trump in there was a slap at the mainstream establishment on both sides of the aisle, both the left and the right, saying that let's get back to a common sense constitutional government instead of all this crap that's been going on that's creating the destruction of America. And if we're going to take our country back, we've got to put an end to abortion on demand, and we've got to put the principles in our Declaration of Independence back in force. And it says our entire country is based on these three principles: the protection of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or, in other words, the possession of property, the ownership of property. This is mine. My money is my money. And taxation is simply saying the king owns my money and he can do with it whatever he wants, and I'm not allowed to because I'm just a peasant. And so there's some things there that if we all understand where power really resides, and that we the people are the power source in all aspects of government, and that we must wake up and turn this all around, it's got to happen, and it's got to happen now. And this window is open, and if we don't take advantage of it, then it's going to be our own fault.
I agree. We had a program. We've had two of them. We had one just before Thanksgiving and one just before Christmas, where we had all of our previous guests on the program have an opportunity as if they were speaking directly to President-elect Trump. And the premise of it was that you've been ushered into the Oval Office and you've been given 5 minutes to present to President Trump what you would see as the next movement and the best thing he could do as president to strengthen the rights of the American people. So with that, would you like to do a message to President Trump? And I'll pass this along to his transition team members.
Yes, in fact, I've already put in to Hope Hicks, who's on his transition team and has already been selected as one of his top aides, that I would like to be on the staff. I would like to work for Trump. And the one that I'd like to work on the most would be the director of the IRS. And I even put on there, if you really want to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C., put Sheriff Mack in charge of the IRS. And,
that's a wonderful idea.
Wouldn't that be fantastic? But I've also put in for the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, which I would be very qualified to do. Border Patrol, I would be very qualified to do. My degree is in Latin American Studies. I speak fluent Spanish. I lived a year in Guatemala and a year in El Salvador in Central America. And there's a lot there I could do. But also I put in and told them I could do any ambassadorship in Latin America or any place else that primarily speaks Spanish. And I think that would be one key thing, is to start putting some staunch constitutional conservatives in his administration. So far, he doesn't have too many of those. In fact, very few. We also want him to put Sheriff Clark in charge of some agency there, and I mean a high top position. And so you put Sheriff Clark and Sheriff Mack there in Washington and start draining that swamp with him, because I will only be satisfied if I were the director of the IRS that the IRS is completely abolished, just as Ted Cruz said he would do. Another thing there is we would ask Trump to appoint a Supreme Court justice that is pro-life, which he has said he would do, that is pro-Constitution and pro-Second Amendment. And we would even like to have him consider Judge Napolitano for that position, which his name has never come up, but he would be the best one. We'd also like to have him pick Judge Roy Moore. Mike Lee would be another good one, who is a senator from Utah. But then, with any of those three, you are completely protecting the Constitution, protecting the people, and protecting life. Next, I would ask President Trump to go ahead and abolish some of the agencies that he already talked about abolishing, and that is Department of Labor, Department of Energy, and absolutely Department of Education. Now, when he was pinpointed on that one, President Trump, you said that you would get rid of a lot of the Department of Education but not get rid of it entirely, but really just keep it skeletal, I think is the word that he used. We're all for that, and we would help you probably get rid of all of it. It's just completely superfluous, and the state should be running their own education. And finally, and probably most importantly, as far as restoring liberty, you cannot have a fake and paper money. So get rid of the Federal Reserve. Recently, we have evidence that the United Nations is against Israel, and this is a great indication and a great time now for us to get out of the United Nations and get the United Nations out of the United States. We don't need them. Since we became a member, we've been entangled in so many foreign wars and conflicts that it's just absolutely mind-blowing how much the United Nations is supposed to be peaceful has created wars for the United States to be involved in. So get out of the United Nations, abolish the IRS, abolish the Federal Reserve, put the regulation of money back where it belongs with Congress, where it is constitutionally required, restore the Constitution, keep the 10 amendments or the Bill of Rights sacred, and restore common sense and the Constitution to what's happening in Washington, D.C. There's no way to drain the swamp if we don't restore the Constitution. If we just replace it with another swamp, and we've accomplished nothing. So Sheriff Clark, I know, is a good friend of yours. I am a good friend of Sheriff Clark's. Put us to work. We will help you. We will have your back. We will have the backs of the American people. And most importantly, we both know and understand the Constitution, and if we can't drain that swamp without restoring the Constitution. I'm with you all the way. I came to your rallies out here in Arizona. Another good friend of mine is Sheriff Arpaio. He can vouch for my experience and for my character, as well as Sheriff Clark can. And we want to back you up, and we want to make America great again. And we mean this sincerely. And what made America great in the first place was our Constitution and Declaration of Independence. Let's restore those as the supreme laws of the land. Let's put some people in office and in your cabinet that really believe in these ideals, that really believe in you, and want to really fulfill your goal of making America great again. Let's do it. And again, there's no way we can do that without putting the Constitution back where it belongs as our founders established for this great country. Thank you so much for your time, and my number is 928-432-1879.
Well, that's terrific. I think you and Sheriff Clark, I can't imagine any two people that are, let's say, have a better pump than you folks would have at draining the swamp. And your comment about not going part way with this, but doing it all the way, you're absolutely right. If we, the one thing we learn with the cancer is if you don't cut it all out, and you leave a little bit there, it'll be right back. And so we need to make sure that we do this the right way. And boy, I would be thrilled. Anything that I could do as far as helping you be part of this administration, I would be thrilled to be part of. So let me know if there's anything I can do to help. With that, I kind of want to talk about something. You know, you mentioned the Western Ranch situation with the Bundys, and we recently interviewed Shauna Cox, who was in the vehicle that Lavoy Finicum was driving, and she actually video recorded the ambush that happened, and she did that on her phone.
Yeah.
And it was pretty obvious that it was a predetermined, premeditated ambush. And I would like to hear how you think that strong local sheriffs would have prevented that tragedy from happening.
Well, it could have really happened quite easily, and that is that the sheriff, in fact, I told the sheriff what he could do to stop all this, and regrettably, the sheriff there did nothing. And he could have simply said, you're not going to do any of that in my county. If you want to come pick up the Hammonds, you show me the warrants, and I'll decide if that's okay to do. But I told him how he could have protected the Hammonds, and he should have. And he could have stopped that whole thing. Also, isn't it astonishing that we have the local sheriff shaking hands with Ammon Bundy while he supposedly was occupying the Malheur building? If he was already breaking the law and committing that supposedly horrible federal offense against the federal government, why didn't the sheriff arrest him?
Right.
He made no move whatsoever to arrest Ammon Bundy or others that were meeting with the sheriff. The Bundys and the occupiers also went into the airport and contacted the FBI and said they wanted to meet with them and to have a discussion with them. They went into town hall meetings. They went into Safeway and shopped at the grocery store there. Some of them went home and spent time with their families and went to church and then came back. I hardly call that an occupation. And so the easiest way to have arrested the Bundys, instead of using this stupid SWAT team mentality that I already talked about, that we've already discussed, they could have, and the sheriff could have been key in this, is say, okay, we're having a town hall meeting. I'm going to have the FBI heads there. I'm going to be there. We want all of you to come in. And once they come in, you have two-man teams, grab each one, place them in handcuffs, and take them to jail. Now, that would have been logistically the safest way and the easiest way to do that. Instead, no, they get their drones and their helicopters and their SWAT teams and their sharpshooters and pull them down out on a road and do a felony stop and shoot a man in the back that should have never been shot. And LaVoy Finicum, they declared it was justified. Well, it was not justified. And if you never see a gun, even if you see a guy move his hands quickly, where some cops try to make that justification, we did training where that was not allowed. And unless you see a gun, you don't get to shoot somebody. And it turns out that whole thing should have never happened anyway. And if they had just simply used a little common sense, and I don't agree with the people going into the Shauna already knows, and Ammon does too. I did not agree with this tactic. However, I disagreed even more with the law enforcement in how to resolve it. It was stupid, and it was ridiculous. Now, I talked to Ammon personally while he was in there. He actually asked me to come there and be there with him. I refused, and I told Ammon that I loved him, and I knew he's a great guy, but I told him to get out of there, and I told him that you're going to go to jail and somebody's going to get hurt. Now, I regret that I was correct on that, but I pragmatically and historically, I know and understand who the federal government is, and I know their tactics. And I was so afraid that it was going to go south on them, and it sure did. So the whole thing with that is I went and testified on their behalf. I believe that I was instrumental, even in a small way, though, that they got off. And I believe, though, that the best evidence that was provided was Ammon Bundy being on the stand for 3 days. And I believe that the people on the jury saw that this was not a criminal. He was a good man, and that they weren't going to send good people to prison over this stupid issue. And I'm proud of that jury, even though it came from a very liberal group of people in Portland. But it was a miracle. The verdict was a miracle, and I was really grateful to be a part of that miracle.
Well, I've learned a long time ago, and we had John Lamb on, and we talked about that whole Malheur trial and how that jury came up with the conclusion that they did, and it was pretty obvious that the federal government didn't have a case, and what they were doing was more detrimental to their case than actually to their advantage. And one of the things we've learned, I've begun to learn, is that many of the liberals, even though I don't agree with their political philosophy, a lot of them are well-meaning, and when they see injustice, a lot of times even the most liberal will realize that injustice is not something that they need to promote. Would you I guess we're getting toward the end of the show here, and I would just like to give you a few minutes to talk, and I know you've done this throughout the program, but talk to the listeners in our audience and tell them how important it is for them to get involved and how they can do that and how they can bring better leadership into local government.
Well, the bottom line with all of this is there is a place to go for freedom. There is a solution. There is hope. And I don't believe there's anything more important than hope. Our belief in our Creator and our belief in our foundation and in our founding fathers, it's still there. and he governs in the affairs of man, to quote Ben Franklin. And we can do this. And it's, let me reiterate this. This is a peaceful process. There's no violence involved in anything that I've been saying. Would the federal government try to respond violently as they did in Burns, Oregon on this whole thing? Yeah, you can't trust them. But you can trust your sheriff, and you can trust each other, and you can trust your neighbors, and you can start working together. And we've got to get off the couch and turn off the TV, and we've got to get involved in this process. If we do not get involved in this process, America is doomed. The catastrophe of losing our republic will be accomplished and finished. And that's where we come in, because we know better. We have the knowledge and the wherewithal to take our country back. And you don't have to look at the entire country to do that, and you certainly don't have to look at Washington, D.C. Look down at your hands. Hold your hands out in front of you and look down at your hands. Therein lies the solution. It is in your hands. You owe it to your children and to your grandchildren, and you owe it to our founders to stand for American liberty. Get with your sheriff. Get him trained. Get our CSPOA training there for your local sheriff's office and police departments. You can set this up yourself. Give us a call. Go to our website. Our phone numbers and our email addresses are all there, cspoa.org. You can do it. There is hope. There is a solution. And we can take America back, county by county, sheriff by sheriff, and state by state. It's all up to you, just the way it was in the very beginning. We, the people, fought a revolutionary war, and then we, the people, established a new government, a new experiment, where people were left to govern themselves. We have got to take that back. We can. And look at your county. That's where your solution is. It's in your hands. Let's take America back. God bless every one of you as you stand for American liberty and stand for what's right.
Oh, thank you. That was extremely powerful and right to the point. Sheriff Mack, I'd like to give you just a minute to tell everyone, introduce websites and ways that they can contact you. I know that you did through the cspoa.org site. Are there other ways that our listeners can be part of your attempt to take back our country?
Yes, we want each one of you to make a donation. Buy my books. I've written 7 books. The books are all there. They are tools for liberty, especially this tiny little pocket-sized booklet called The Victory for State Sovereignty. It's a copy of my Supreme Court case, the only time in American history when a sheriff sued the federal government and won a major landmark case at the U.S. Supreme Court. Every one of you should be familiar with that case, because our entire foundation, the entire Association of Constitutional Sheriffs, is based on that decision. So become familiar with that decision and use it. But there's other books there too about the county sheriff, about gun control, and about Are You a David? My most recent book, and I apologize for that plane flying overhead. Man, that thing's right overhead. But the Are You a David book presents everything that we've talked about today in a very building block format. So all those books are extremely valuable, but none more than that copy of the Supreme Court decision, which costs a couple of bucks. So everybody get a hold of that and then start passing those out to other officials that you want to educate, and ask them, have you ever read or heard about this decision where a sheriff sued the federal government and won? Well, that's vital. And so we've got to get that moving, and everybody can help. And if everybody does a part of joining, get the books out there, start a training session in your county, or come to one of our classes where we certify you as a CSPOA instructor, because we can't do it all alone. We need you with us. So please get involved in this process. It's all up to us.
Well, thank you. And we do have your information on our banner, on our descriptor for the radio show. So our listeners can go to that site and they can click on any of those areas that indicate how to contact Sheriff Mack. So please do that. And Sheriff Mack, I want to thank you again for being on our program this week. And I want to thank our listeners for being part of this program and creating the kind of dynamic that has moved us into a whole new realm of listenership. We are now reaching out to a very large audience, and I want to thank everyone that have been part of that process. And I want to invite our listeners to join us again next week for another program in Connecting the Dots. Thank you, and good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this week's show with Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. God bless. Good night. We'll see you next Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific.